we would like to present the main ideas expressed in Ноономика, the monograph authored by the President of the Free Economic Society of Russia, Director of Institute for New Industrial Development, named after Sergei Witte, Doctor of Economic Sciences, Professor Sergei Bodrunov. Ноономика, foresight based on technological, economic, and social changes. Nowadays, it is becoming increasingly obvious that the global economy, and generally speaking, the global civilization, are on the verge of changes. The series of crises at the end of the 20th, beginning of the 21st centuries, increased instability of social systems, change in the structure of economic leadership, global financial turbulence, international terrorist threat, environmental issues, and explosive development of completely novel and previously unthought-of technologies inexorably indicate that our civilization will soon transition to a new state, which cannot be adequately described by conventional philosophical constructs and socio-economic models. So what is the main driver of ongoing changes? Where are we going to? And what lies ahead? Professor Bodrunov answers these questions by introducing the concept of Ноономика, model of a new social order which can come to pass if we pursue the rational path of civilizational development. The history of industrial development conclusively proves that in spite of all changes in material production that have happened over the past century, the very existence of the economy is still reliant on material production, which constitutes predominantly industrial production. Therefore, a change in the dominant industrial technological mode automatically brings about changes in the social order. In the second half of the 20th century, John Kenneth Galbraith analyzed such changes in his book entitled The New Industrial State. But the perception of the industrial society as a system that is continuously evolving in its technological aspect was overruled by the new concept of post-industrialism. This increasingly popular paradigm presented in Daniel Bell's and Alvin Toffler's works rejected the leading role of material production. But global economic and financial crisis curbed the enthusiasm of post-industrialists. The current development model has exhausted itself. Change is in the air, for we perceive the upcoming transition to a new stage of civilizational development that Bodrunov labels the New Industrial Society of the Second Generation, NIS2. The transition towards the NIS2 is not an abstract concept, but an actual process, which is vigorously, albeit unevenly, unfolding in various locales of the global economic space. The author upholds the traditions of classical political economy by asserting that the NIS2 economy will be based on material production. Science will actually serve as an immediate production force, and culture with its formative effect, along with lifelong education, will become an integral element of production activity. It is clear that accelerated development of new technologies, which results in the transition towards the NIS2, will require the transformation of all economic and social relations and institutions. Ноономика by Professor Sergei Bodrunov seeks to assess this transformation. The new concept of Ноономика, which Professor Bodrunov introduced into the academic discourse, synthesizes conventional economic ideas with a humanitarian perspective on the social order, which can be traced back to Russia's cultural and philosophical tradition, established by Professor Vladimir Vernadsky in the early 20th century. In his analysis of human development, Vernadsky prioritized the rationality of social processes and their management, based on humane values as opposed to spontaneous and primitive natural instincts. Our civilization is about to perform a qualitative leap as people will gradually move away from direct involvement in material production and assume the role of controllers and regulators, as Marx portended. Not material resources, but knowledge will become the main source for production development. Simulative wants will gradually lose their significance and get replaced with the desire to acquire knowledge. The system of income inequality will be superseded by inequality based on the difference in talents and aptitude. Humanity, as Vernadsky pointed out, will have to shift away from the consumption of natural resources to the reproduction of geobiocenosis. Under this coming future, traditional economic categories and laws, such as value, property, money, etc., will lose their significance and may disappear entirely. The future will bring the transformation of economic relations into non-economic ones in the sphere of production. The problems of time-saving and efficient use of resources will become purely technical rather than social. They will be increasingly dealt with not directly by people, but by a superstructure external in relation to the human society, an unattended, autonomous, self-regulated technosphere. And this is not a prediction of some very distant future. This is an observation of the actual changes, albeit barely noticeable, the birth of what is not simply an economy, but a qualitatively new phenomenon. Noonomy. Noonomy is a non-economic way of organizing an economy to meet people's needs, implemented by a human society which has gone beyond the limits of material production. In other words, noonomy is an economic system that differs from economy by the lack of relations between people in the process of material production. While in the past people built their own social institutions and made economic decisions depending primarily on the type of relations they were engaged in during production activity, today the situation has changed drastically. As people cease to be directly involved in production, their activities are governed by the relationship between human society as a whole and the increasingly unattended production sphere as a whole. A new type of society, the No Society, will be formed. This society will rely on noonomy as its material foundation and will be characterized by no social relations, which will not include conventional production relations. The system of public production under the No Society will incorporate prioritized development of knowledge-intensive, smart production, resulting integration of production, science, and education within a single reproductive contour, leading to the formation of a new type of reproduction. Gradual diminishment of the role of utilitarian and simulative needs and the rise of a new class of needs, the needs of an intelligent person, or new needs. Development of new appropriate values and motives for the activity of the main subjects of material and spiritual production, which shed their economic character. Cultural rather than economic imperatives are becoming the most important for identifying human needs in a sensible and rational manner. This will allow us to solve many of the development problems which currently face modern-day humanity and stand in the way of progress. Cultural rather than economic imperatives are becoming the most important for identifying human needs in a sensible and rational manner. This will allow us to solve many of the development problems which currently face modern-day humanity and stand in the way of progress. Today, civilization has reached one of the most important forks in its history, either a turn to the intelligent person, a move towards rationalization of development, or a path to a technotronic society, in which the elite can satisfy its ever-growing simulative needs, while the majority of the population is employed in the service sphere, which is rapidly becoming a servile sphere. At the same time, the risks of losing control over the development of the technosphere and the gradual cyborgization with no guarantee for the existence of man either as a biological entity or as a social being have increased significantly. Development governed by no principles is a conceivable and viable alternative. Obviously, noonomy will not be built in a day. A transition period will be needed for transforming economic relations into more socialized and humanized ones, defining a new character of rationality, new development values, and goals for the society. The situation at the beginning of the 21st century resembles the one at the beginning of the 18th century. The leaders of that era were those who boldly broke with the traditions. and made a qualitative leap into the world of what was then viewed as new technologies: STEAM, capital, and personal freedom. The leaders of today will be those daring enough to leapfrog to furthering knowledge-based production, human progress, and solving tasks of node development rather than those of traditional economic growth. Noономika has already received numerous positive responses from the members of the scholarly community. Academician Sergei Glazyev, advisor to the president of the Russian Federation on issues of regional economic integration, stated, "The theory of Noономika outlines our path into the future devoid of compulsory labor, poverty, and fighting over limited resources. Many thinkers have dreamed of such society, but their attempts at building it could not succeed in the absence of an appropriate technological foundation." Sergei Bodrunov shows how the combination of quickly growing technological capabilities and a mature spiritual culture can deliver the humanity from the kingdom of necessity to the kingdom of freedom, provided that people become truly sapient. Professor Samir Amin, director of the Third World Forum, wrote, "This book is very informative. The author has a strong, useful sense of the historical change through which our society is moving. The book gives flesh to Marx's vision of future communism as a higher stage in the history of mankind." James Kenneth Galbraith, the University of Texas at Austin. A deep inquiry into sources of well-being and the need for an integration of technology and culture in constructing a knowledge economy under environmental challenges and resource constraints. Western readers will especially value Sergei Bodrunov's synthesis of Russian and Western texts, notably those of my father, in the development of his ideas. Ноономика is a model, among other things, of transnational and cross-cultural research and reasoning. In July of 2018, the year which marks the 200th anniversary of Karl Marx, the World Association for Political Economy conferred the Distinguished Achievement Award in Political Economy for the 21st Century on Ноономика by Professor Bodrunov. The award was presented by London Metropolitan University professor Alan Freeman. The book is the result of Professor Bodrunov's painstaking creative work, which took him many years to complete. Many of the topics described in this book were developed by the author in the form of separate papers. In Ноономика, those papers are combined and systematically arranged, yielding a fundamentally new vision of trends in the future development of human society. The author hopes that Ноономика will encourage a passionate discussion of pressing problems of the future, which is already knocking at our door.